you very much, Herr Commissioner. The speech indeed was wide, informative, thought-provocative, and I'm glad you are ready to accept questions. You take the other seat and take the questions in peace now. Back to normality, questions.
Yes. You mentioned energy.
Your name? I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
Maria Tofridis.
Maria Tofridis. And what do you do, Maria?
So I'm a political scientist.
Great.
Working on European issues.
Great.
And that's why my ears picked up when you spoke about the European coal and steel community.
Yes, yes.
And energy.
Yes.
So I'd just like your thoughts. What would you think of beginning with a technocratic approach to solving the problem? For example, speaking of the European coal and steel community,
Yes.
the idea was to lock the France and Germany, which caused the World War, in, to avoid future conflict, which obviously was a successful model. And we have energy and the various issues, and as you said, the warmongering of certain quarters, or saying this is ours. So what do you think of using that as initially a technocratic model for building on a solution? But,
What do you mean by technocratic?
well, having a committee to manage it along the lines of the economic and coal and steel community, and generating opinion that this can be something positive, that it should be seen as a positive path to the solution.
It's a good idea. Part of the mix is also the energy. And the president is on record, and the foreign minister is on record that with the solution, of course, with the citizens, and all citizens are entitled to the shares of the gas and energy. First of all, it's all citizens. It should also be fair that all citizens should also pay taxes. Because some of us are not paying taxes at all. So all of them should have equal rights, but also equal obligations. Number one. Number two, if it has taken us close to what now, 40 years and we have not managed to find a solution to this question, I'm afraid that if you put also the energy into the mix of the talks as such, at the technical level, who gets what, how, when, and stuff like that, it's going to frightfully complicate the issue. At any rate, by the time that money's income comes in from the energy, it's going to be 10, 15 years from now. We don't want to wait another 10, 15 years to solve the problem. Because what is happening in the northern part, and people do not want to recognize it, many of the think tanks here, they don't give me the time of day. That's why I'm so happy to be invited here, at least speak to. They don't give me the time of day because sometimes I don't necessarily exercise orthodox diplomacy, huh? Okay. What was it? I was trying to lead into something. I lost my train of thought. Yeah. What is also happening, and that's why we cannot wait another 10 years, is, and again, don't believe what I say. You can read them under third-party objectives. Colonizers coming from Turkey. Okay. 482 churches, monasteries, which have been turned into stables, military depots, pizza restaurants, hotels. The cultural identity of the country is being changed constantly. The settlers settling or occupied territory is a war crime. The other day, the United Kingdom, the other day, the European Union chastised Israel for the settlers and for building houses. They don't do that for Cyprus. Okay? It seems like there are two categories of settlers. I don't buy that. I don't buy into that. So, settlement of occupied territories is a war crime based on the 1949 Geneva Convention. Okay. So the more you postpone, the worse it gets. Even Cypriot Turks are beginning to feel a minority in their own community. So we have to solve, and we have to solve yesterday. I repeat. So the technical, whether we can put all this, the technical aspect, I think can work in parallel if you like, but it cannot be put in the mix. Because we have yet to tackle the hardcore questions in the negotiations. We have yet to tackle territory. 82% of the population cannot certainly have close to 40% of the territory, and more than 60% of the shorelines. Okay? We have yet to tackle territory. We have yet to tackle refugees. We have yet to tackle the security issues that I addressed to you about. These things need to be addressed, and they have to be addressed in a framework that is acceptable. Because when you negotiate, you have to negotiate with these certain parameters. If in the European Union, we have a common dictionary. When we say about human rights, we all know what we're talking about. This is what we want to do now. I think I answered the question, so because I don't want to give another lecture on it, but these are my thoughts. Thank you.
So the energy should come later?
Well, the energy, I'm saying we cannot put it right now in the talks, because that if it has taken us 40 years and we still don't have a solution, if you put it in the... And it's interesting that what Turkey is saying about having a ship. Let me reverse it around. If in the talks, if the energy were to be found in the northern part of Cyprus, do you think that Turkey would have given the Cypriot Greeks any share of that? No. Irrespective, we are the government, we are the states, we have international obligations to all the citizens of the Republic. You know, any citizen of the Republic can take us to court. Cypriot Turks have taken the Cyprus government to court, and you know what? They won. Okay? The LGBT movement took us to court, and you know what? They won. Okay? And we have to change things. So, right now, my answer to your question is, let's concentrate on what we're doing. This thing is 10, 15 years from now, you know, takes a lot of money to build an LNG. You're talking about 10 billion. You know, and if we're really serious about this, people should also pay. I'm a taxpayer. Every 10 pounds I get, 6 pounds goes to the government. I have so much haircut in Cyprus, but I don't have any hair left. I say, listen, I feel in some ways too. So please, why not? Everybody should be in this boat.
You have to collect the taxes as well.
All right, okay, good. Thank you, Doc. It was me that I
Move from Maria to Mary.
Maria and Mary, the same thing.
Okay, yes. I enjoyed your speech. I don't usually listen to speeches. For instance, Castelidis did a prepared speech in the House of Commons, and I thought, oh no, I hear
How boring,
it. So I liked your speech. But I wonder why you say Cypriot Turks and Cypriot Greeks, because I spend all my time explaining that in English, it's the other way round. So Greek Cypriots or Greek-speaking Cypriots and Turkish-speaking Cypriots. Because if you believe in the European Union, it's about citizenship of a country, and that country is Cyprus.
Yes.
And so I think it shouldn't be the way around you say it, and I'd like to know your excuse. And I would also, I would also think that if we look at the north of Cyprus, we see a lot of people who are descended from people who come in from, you call settlers, but they're very different. They come from Hatay, they come from the Black Sea, they come from different parts. Some of them are Kurds, some of them are Alevis who've been fighting against the establishment in Turkey. And they don't see themselves, they are Cypriot Turks, but they're not Turkish Cypriots. And the Turkish Cypriots are trying to carve out a survival mechanism for themselves. And I think by using this terminology, we'll lose the sight of actually, we're in the European Union, Cyprus is in the European Union, and Cypriots are Cypriot citizens, first and foremost, whether they speak Greek or Turkish, whether they're trained in whichever school, and whatever their culture they want as a cultural identity is fine. But as citizens, they are Cypriots.
Okay. Mary, I have no problem with you now. I have none. The way, and strictly speaking, you are correct, because the Constitution talks about Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots.
It talks about Greeks and Turks, the constitution is, which is totally 1960.
1960, they got all the Greek Cypriots put them up.
No Cypriots exist.
Okay, no Cypriots.
Only donkeys, you know?
Yeah, that's even worse. Even worse. The only reason, Greeks of Cyprus and Turks of Cyprus, is that how the correct terminology?
And at least you are not natives.
No, then thank you. But I have no problem with your narrative. The only reason, my excuse and the way of thinking about it, is that from talking to people and engaging people and having good conversations, questions and answers, when you say Greek Cypriot, the emphasis seems to be much more on the Greek. If you say Turkish Cypriot, the emphasis is much more on the Turkish. I think let me change things around. By saying Cypriot Greek, I give the emphasis on the Cypriot, which is my primary goal, citizen, all these things that you mentioned. Of Greek ethnic background, fine. Cypriot of Turkish ethnic background, fine. Maronites, Armenians, Latins, we shouldn't forget that as well, because I have Armenian friends who take offense. They said to me, listen, you guys are talking about yourselves. Hey, what about me? I said, you're right. So that's the excuse, that's the explanation. Maybe it's not correct. If you go to the States, Mary, and you say Polish American, the emphasis is not on the Polish. The emphasis seems to be on the American. Now, in the Cyprus context, if you say Greek Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, for me, the emphasis seems to be going more on the Greeks and on the Turks. And while I'm a Cypriot of Greek ethnic background and I'm proud of it, like I said, I mean the Cypriot of Turkish ethnic background, I'm sure equally proud of it, the Armenian, the Cypriot Armenian. So maybe in the end I have to say Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, no? What did you have in your speech? You did. So Mary, thank you for that. So I did not at the end.
I'm just saying it plays in a different way in the north to Cyprus.
I'm sorry?
Plays in a different way in north to
Cyprus.
If you say Cypriot Turks, it's what Erdogan's saying, that he wants to have more citizens from Turkey recognised as Cypriots.
So you advise me to keep saying Greek Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot?
Better.
Okay, all right. Yeah, but I would say to you, you said to me what I call the settlers. I just want to say that that's what they are. Okay, I mean they are there, implanted for a purpose. So it's not what you say, what I say. It's also what the parliamentary settlers. So
what I'm saying is that you lump them together,
yeah.
and the Turkish Cypriots who are living with them know that they are different. They're from different parts with different habits. They are Turks, and they shouldn't be there. But they are different in relationship to Turkey and what they will do in a referendum and this sort of thing. Some of them can vote, some of them can't.
I don't mean to lump them together. Turkish Cypriots who are citizens of the Republic, they have every right, I repeat, and obligations. They should have every obligation, every other citizen. But you're right, I will try to correct it and do my narrative, because I have no problem with what you say. And that the settlers are settlers, we consider them illegal. Okay? And in the talks we did say that, okay, some of them that have married, that they have children, okay, you can look at it under humanitarian law, the rest should pack and go. Anyway. Anybody else, please? Please? Aliki.
First of all, thank you, High Commissioner, for an extraordinary end to the day. And Mr. Charalambous was absolutely correct. The end with the best.
I don't know, he exaggerates, you know.
Now, I'm a cognitive scientist. I know, for me, being a chemist, everything is acid or caustic, and it's a little bit in the middle of neutral.
So am I acid?
You are in the neutral. Excellent.
Acid or caustic, I don't know.
In other words, you are correct.
We had a wonderful session this afternoon on culture. Mr. Andrew Wright, who was the chair. Sorry, so would I call you? Sorry. Yes, he mentioned the word. Sorry, he mentioned the word border with regards to the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And then you said, was the question along the lines of how do they feel about the border, referring to, I had to ask him, who do you mean? And he said, well, Cyprus. And I said, but there is no border in Cyprus.
Yeah.
It was the word border, and I tried to explain that it is an occupied area and it's the Republic of Cyprus. And the reason why I would not call it a border is because subliminally and subconsciously we're telling everybody these are two countries. Would you please put your take on it to this gentleman so that they know why it is not an accepted border?
Well,
it is a crossing.
I will give it a try,
border.
Professor,
Yeah.
and see if I can. The way we talk has a lot to do, obviously, with the way we think. Okay. When we're talking about the Republic of Cyprus as a subject of international law, it means east, west, north, south, except the two bases. The bases, the two British bases, are not Republic of Cyprus. When we say that Cyprus joined the European Union, we mean that east, west, north, south joined the European Union, except the two bases. Okay? Cyprus is a member of the European Union, United Kingdom is a member of the European Union, but the bases are not a member of the European Union. Cyprus is a member of the Euro, United Kingdom is not a member of the Euro, but the Euro is a legal, tender in the basis. Now, therefore, if we are exactly what you said, Ali, if you say a border, it means exactly a border. I mean, of two recognized countries. North Korea, South Korea, a border. North Vietnam, South Vietnam, prior to the unification, a border. No, we don't. It's not that we're oblivious to reality, but you know, when the Turkish troops were advancing, that's where they stopped, and that was the ceasefire line. It was a ceasefire line. So we call it ceasefire line. It opened up. There was also a green line in Nicosia, which was drawn by the British officer at the time with a green. Hence, green lines, and you know. And I would argue that divisions do not work anywhere they are. Yeah. And I would also say, I cannot, at least intellectually, not talk about the British MPA-policy at the time, which was divided rule. Divided rule in Cyprus, Palestine, Indian subcontinent, Ireland, I do not know. Okay. That was 50, 60 years ago. It was a different world. I don't want to be concentrating on those things. But that is why we say ceasefire line. Terminology is also frightfully important. As Mary also pointed out, whether I should say Greek Cypriot or Cypriot Greek, and now I'm convinced that we would say, go back to default. Papadopoulos Paintuti never corrected me. And he was always looking at the text. Maybe he gave up on me, but he never corrected me. And I thought if he didn't correct me, maybe I'm doing something right. Anyhow. So, I do not know, does it make sense to you?
Yes, no, thank you very much for clarifying that. I think that reflects back on something we were discussing about terminology during the seminar and the parallels in regards to Cyprus and Ireland, but also the differences. And the fact that the term border is used in Ireland all the time, despite similarities in terms of history over division. Yet in Cyprus, the term border is not used. So that's an education for me. That's a reflection, I think, of what, you know, today's coming together is all about. It's about us learning across these divisions.
It's two ways. I'm learning.
And learning about language and how language is so important, how narratives are so important, and how, you know, at the end of the Irish session, we ended up talking about James Joyce and literature and how the Irish took the English language and appropriated it, if you like, recolonised it and used it in a cultural sense. So it's very interesting that all these things come back to language ultimately, and that language is absolutely crucial.
It's frightfully important the meanings that come with languages, of course, because then they're in your head. I mean, compromise in Farsi, it's almost like seen as a defeat. So you don't say compromise. It's frightfully important to get into the skin, if I can say that, of the other side. And we do have a lexicon too. I mean, for instance, in any other country, if you have an 18% community, they are called a minority. Okay? Pure and simple. A minority. In Cyprus, you don't call Cypriot, Turkish Cypriots. You don't call them a minority, because we have agreed, both sides agreed, the establishment of a bicommunal, bizonal federal republic, So they're equals, political equals. Mind you, another tidbit in another parenthesis, this question was asked to a United Kingdom minister here. There were maybe 28 colleagues around the table. And that was before the Scottish referendum. And the question was that, assuming that the referendum is a no to independence, of course it's not the end of the story, because we have to move to Devo Max, and if you do things for Scotland, obviously you have to do for the United Kingdom, obviously you have to do for Wales, obviously you have to do for Northern Ireland. Are we moving to some sort of a federal structure? Because as you know better than I do, that the United Kingdom is centralized, has a strong central government. And these things, like I said, they were asked before the referendum. So if the referendum is no to independence, are we moving to a quasi or a federal structure? You know what the answer of the minister was? Who shall remain nameless? What are we talking about? We are 84% of the population. How much is the British? 84, 82? We're not going to accept federation. What are you talking about? The English, not the British. We are 84%. And I said, hello?
Yeah.
Hello? I mean, I didn't say hello because it was, I didn't want to monopolize things. I tried to find my way to talk privately. It never happened because, the minister was well guarded, okay? But I said, listen, this when I say a historical compromise, I really mean it. 80% plus of the population have agreed to have 50-50 to have a federation. Show me a single country in the world that has accepted that. There has to be a functional federation. It has to be, we cannot have the problems of Bosnia and Herzegovina and many others. So these things, I put the parenthesis because I wanted to also talk about the parameters of it. But coming back to your question, yes, the way we talk has a lot to do with the way we think and the importance of language and what people associate things with. Because very often people, we're not talking in courts. But the moment you say something that, when you say, for instance, in the Cyprus lexicon, if you say two peoples, then all of a sudden, two peoples is what? Separate peoples, separate everything. Peoples have the right of self-determination. You have self-determination. I go to leave and I leave. So we say no. One country, as it has been the case with, different communities. Now, the Marmans, the Armenians, and the Latins are not considered communities. Oh no, they're not considered communities, but they are religious minorities. And listen, religious minorities. Now you have to decide. Where do you want to belong? Do you want to belong to the Greek Cypriots or to the Turkish Cypriots? Can you imagine given that choice? I'll spit in their face and tell them to fly a kite. That's what I would have done. We're doing the same things now. That is an objective. Thank you.
Any questions on the right?
One question.
Yes, please.
You mentioned the bases.
Yes.
Andrew Wright.
Andrew Wright.
I used to be a philosopher.
You used to be once a philosopher, always a philosopher.
Always a philosopher. You think we can talk about everything. So.
And then if you take the W out of the right, you're right. So,
I was to the right as well.
you're to the right, yes. Do you vote
you
conservative or Labour? I should be asking. No. So I'm sorry.
You mentioned the bases, and you seem to be quite pleased with their existence because of ISIS.
Yes.
Can I ask further question? If there were no such thing as ISIS or something similar, would you still support the bases, the existence of it?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
An equivocal yes. Why? Because the legitimacy of the state, if we challenge, let's put it this way, if we challenge the basis, we challenge our own legitimacy and our own legal existence. Cyprus as a subject of international law exists because of the treaties that established Cyprus, parenthesis, the Cypriots have nothing to do with them, close parenthesis, because these things were negotiated by the Greeks, the Turks, and the Brits. But so if we challenge that, we're challenging our own existence. No.
Well, you can say, we don't like the bases, can we have a new constitution without the
No,
bases?
can you imagine what would that be? Listen,
Yes, I'm just talking about your personal opinion.
My personal-
I'm not saying the British would agree.
of course they wouldn't agree. Of course they wouldn't agree. But my personal opinion is that the bases are vestiges of colonialism. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would say that. But 50 years down the line, 10 years after being partners in the European Union, seeing what is happening in our region, they're serving also our interests. And I'm fine with that. And if I weren't fine with that, Andrea will tell you.
You've answered me, I'll answer you, I'm later.
I went to the labor, I went to the conference. So I didn't mean to be facetious, but I always like to. Yeah. Elizabeth, please.
Your Excellency,
Euripides is my name.
I'm still on the High Commissioner. I can't go that far.
Yes, High Commissioners even get
This
four
is-
horses when they present credentials to the Majesty. So I got 4 horses, as opposed to 2 horses that the American ambassador gets. Okay.
This may seem like a frivolous question, but it must often strike you and other Greek speakers that all the languages of the world are dependent on so much Greek vocabulary, diagnosis, synthesis, philosopher, etc. Do you ever wish you could recall these words or license them out? And that way you would show the strength of Greek and Greek Cypriot culture by making every other language using these words pay.
Elizabeth, I love you. We missed our chance in 1776.
Were you involved in the American Revolution?
Well, isn't it nice to go
Not
in
you
time
personally.
machine? The way of thinking? No, I have not, I don't really have tangible sources, but I understand from people talking, but I have not found them in hardcore, really respectable sources, that during 1776, there was actually some talk whether the United States should adopt English as a language or Greek. Now, can you imagine what would have been the case if they would have said, okay, the British president, White House, let's change the origin. Can you imagine what would have happened? Can you imagine if Alexander the Great, instead of going east, would have gone west? Okay, now I'm trying there is a famous speech by Zolotas, who was central, he was
The general manager of Greece, or Bank of Greece.
the Bank of Greece, that we can circulate that at some point. It was 1954, 56.
No, much later.
Much later.
When the United Nations were functioning, they had the first international banking union.
Yes. And he spoke, and he made perfect sense by using only Greek words in his speech.
Really?
Yesterday, leave a message after the beep. I'm always afraid that we will do something. Yesterday, I learned a new word, Eupatrid. Eupatrid, E-U-P-P-A-T-R-I-D, F-Patrid. It's in English, Eupatrid. Because I went to Birmingham. There was a gentleman, 91 years old, fought in the Second World War. He was honored by Her Majesty as the OBE. The Lord Lieutenant came, and there the word was Eupatrid, Eupatridis, Pathos, Kyrie eleison. Even the bishop of mentioned Kyrie eleison. But anyhow, language is a means to an end. We have to find the language of communication, the language that does not come across handicapped by the inherent limitations of the mind. I can get a new car. How do I get a new mind? And whatever helps me in that direction, I will welcome any language. I mean, it's so. But the Greek was what it was. I mean, we think Greek, we live Roman. You know, what can we say? And we drink Turkish coffee.
I think at this stage it's very nice for me to translate for you the surname of our High Commissioner, which is Evriviades, which in my translation it means the son of the wise man.
The sound of the wise man?
The one coming from the wise man.
Yes.
Obviously,
they get it wrong in that case.
No. No, I didn't say you are not wise. You continue actually.
Tabitha, would you like to ask something? Because you obviously...
She's sneaking away.
You got me.
On the spot.
Because you have a good experience with Cyprus, I wonder if you want to share something with us.
Yeah. I was interested when you talked about, I've got my notes away now where I quoted you verbatim, but ISIS having a map of a crescent of the Middle East and Cyprus being the star. And also you said something about if Turkey needs to get into bed with ISIS, that's what it will do. I just wondered if you could expand on those.
Well,
I'm not quoting you exactly, as I say, I've put my notes away.
but I'm not also cannot really recall exactly 100% what I said and how I said it, because that's the risk one takes when one doesn't speak from nice written written text, because I can say this is what I told you. You know, that's the end of that, because you have time to think about it. Smart, you know, I was going crazy at the time because I didn't see any teleprompters. I didn't see a speech. I said, obviously he must have an earpiece. Somebody's whistling things in his ears. I said, how else can you do it? The man gave a hell of a performance. You know, but he forgot what he forgot. So, you know, what can I say? So we have to. And I'm sure when I leave, I would say I forgot some things to say. But anyhow. When I said,
a very nice performance tonight.
Yeah, but you don't want to know what I forgot to tell you, because that would be another speech.
What about 8 pages?
Tabitha, it is common knowledge that ISIS used Turkey as a transit to go to Iraq and to Syria. Today, what was in the news is that when the 49, that was terrible, hostages were taken by ISIS and they were freed, that was also at the cost of giving to ISIS a number of prisoners, 180, 2 of which were British citizens. Okay? I'm not criticizing Turkey. Turkey plays in the big league. I play in the small league, and I want to stay in the small league and play football with Malta, Luxembourg, and I don't know who else in my league. And that's why I want to decouple ourselves from all these things, because I think that's our only security and our only viability for the future. They thought it was a good idea, because they're Sunnis, but it's a different sort of Sunnism.
Sorry, forgive me, thought what was a good idea?
The Turks thought it was a good idea to go to bed, as it were, to allow ISIS as a counterweight to Assad, to fight Assad. I mean, this happens all the time. I use the example of Hamas, I use the example of Taliban, and then the master is out, and you cannot control the master. I think that's what happened. Because something like ISIS, I repeat, does not happen overnight. You know, if anybody wants to do something, you cannot just from one day to the next go and do these things. It needs financing, it needs training, it needs guns material, it needs strategy.
How come in the West was asleep?
The West was not asleep, Fritzs. I'm sure they thought that they could control it. I cannot believe in my eyes. I mean, these things, where do all these people get their financing? Where did they get their weapons? Where did they like lightning speed, from one day to the next day, they control so much territory? They somehow miscalculated, and it happens all the time. So that's what I said, that Turkey, I don't blame them. They say, listen, Erdogan says this is not my national interest. I don't care what the Americans say. I don't care what the British say. I'm here elected by the people. This is my national interest, and thank you very much. The rest of you can go fly a kite. Now, this is, I think, in a very crude way what happened. In pursuing their national interest, they thought that ISIS was a good idea. They gave them the facilities. I cannot say that they gave them financing, but how do you, here I want to make a transfer to my own mother in Cyprus, and I have to sign, I don't know how many papers I have to sign in the bank. How does money fly around and people don't know about it? We have so much sophisticated intelligence. We have, in Cyprus, by the way, we have the echelon systems. We have, from Cyprus, you can hear what is happening in Afghanistan. The British bases, the bases are not just confined in Cyprus. They're not just confined on the bases themselves. Okay? So all these things are happening. You can, theoretically they know what you're doing, what pages, you look on the internet, and they don't know any about these things, and it just happen out of the blue. I don't mind. I don't mind. They knew what was happening. Okay, but you cannot have boots on the ground, as it were. I do not know, I mean, there are advisors, do advisors wear boots? I suppose they don't wear boots. Then we're technically correct, But you're not going to put, troops on the ground, so somebody else has to do it, because no matter how much surgical operations you have by air power, ISIS is not going to be defeated like this. You have to put troops on the ground. I mean, okay, Peshmerga, we thought they were indefeatable. Now, not so. So what's going to happen? Because here, this is the problem. Because here you have a whole mentality. You have a whole mentality. Come on, people cutting people's throats and children. For heaven's sakes, who can think about these things? This is what we're dealing with.
On the map that you were talking about.
And on the map, if you look at the Eastern Mediterranean, if you look at Alexandretta, let's put here, here Alexandretta, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, in the Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus is somewhere here. Something like that. We should have had the map. So that, and it scares me. And that's why I'm afraid of the solution. I'm not afraid of the solution. I look at the content of the solution. Because if tomorrow Cyprus is going to say, yes, the basis, yes, we want to do all these things, if the solution does not guarantee that, because Turkey is going to say no, why should I have a third country telling me no? This is what's happening. This is what happened in 2004 with the Arab plan. 2003, we delimitated with Egypt our exclusive economic zone. Cyprus started this. Cyprus was the linchpin in all these things. Okay? We delimited with Egypt in 2003. Arab plan 2004 said, no, that is invalid. What does that have to do with power sharing and the solution of the Cyprus problem? Nothing. What does it have to do with Turkey's ambition in the region? Everything. This is what I'm thinking about the plan itself. The plan and the solution must guarantee, as it were, Cyprus's independent, by independent I mean EU Western policy. We cannot have the vetoes, counter vetoes, and again being at the whim of Turkey. If you push me hard enough, I'm going to tell you about the Greeks, and if you push me hard, I'm going to also tell you about the British. A little bit, but that's not my narrative right now. I did explain that I do see the basis as a colonial vestige, but that's 50 years ago. Okay, we have to move forward. We have to look at our country and our region 10, 15, 20 years down the line. I cannot take a watch and turn it back. And when I speak to some Cypriot Turks and they say, well, 64, this and the other, I do say what Turkish Cypriots, I do say, I do say, listen, I have a Turkish Cypriot friend, who's 64, who said to me, Evriviades Day, my father went to the Larnaca hospital, to the Larnaca police station. December of 64, he never came out of it. How do you think that makes me feel? Because if my father, if that were to happen to my father, I'd become a terrorist the next day. I'd take a machine gun and I shoot everybody. These things happen. you're going to be a prisoner of it. And when I say about this 63, 64, I can bring you cases, Mary, of Greek Cypriots suffering in 63, 64. Go to the reports of the Secretary General. And I don't talk to you about 1974, because you all know about it. 1/3 of the population becoming refugees in their own country. That's 20 million British citizens. Okay? We should have that. We should, the invasion happens in 74, more than 20,000 persons in the northern part, now 438. Old people, they're dying. They're dying, they cannot give their house to their daughters. They cannot give their house to their grandchildren. Why? Because we do things differently over here. This is not my vision.
All right.
Professor, anybody else?
No, I think I'll ask Nick to conclude. Dr. Leonidis.
Thank you all for coming here today. It's been a long day for quite a few of us. Thank you for staying, and most importantly, thank you, His Excellency, Mr. Evriviades, for staying and giving us a very in-depth, realistic view of the near past, present, and hopefully the future.
To agree. My vision is to agree about the history of the future, and not to go into the past.
I think you've shown clarity, depth, and you have given us some confidence in looking forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your kind invitation. May I repeat that the Cyprus High Commission is at your disposal. We're next to Charalambous. Takes me 4.5 seconds to go to Charalambous, 4.5 hours to go home. But you're all welcome.